Hey Bees, I'm Marie from Humblebee and Me, and today we are making some pink clay Mosaic shampoo bars. So these shampoo bars were born out of some experiments I did after I shared last year's chocolate Rasool shampoo bars and had quite a few questions about using different clays and different surfactants. So I started playing with a bunch of different clays and different surfactants, and I ended up creating these bars, and I really like them, so I'm sharing them with you today. The clay we're using is Australian pink clay. When compared to Rasool clay, it's a much sort of pastier, creamier clay. It's much more sort of moldable, and you'll really notice that when you make these shampoo bars and when you watch the video, you'll see I can really just squeeze a clump of the mixture and it just kind of holds together really beautifully. One major bonus of that is that you don't need a press to make these bars. The mixture itself is pretty darn inclined to stick to itself, so you can mold it by hand or press it into a mold of your choosing if you don't have a press. I do have a press though, so that's what I'm going to be using to form these shampoo bars. My press is made by the Bath Bomb Press, which is a Canadian company based out of Edmonton, Alberta, which is just a few hours north of me down here in Calgary. The press and the mold were a gift from Lee, who owns the Bath Bomb Press, so thank you so much, Lee. I love it. We're using two different anionic surfactants in these shampoo bars. The surfactant that gives us the sort of mosaic appearance, these big white chunks, that is Sodium Cocoyl Isethionate in a kind of chunky form. You can buy Sodium Cocoyl Isethionate in a variety of different formats, everything from flakes to noodles to a really fine powder, and then of course the sort of chunky, lumpy powder that I have used, and that's what gives it that look. If you don't have the chunky, lumpy powder, I think my first choice for an alternative would be the noodles or the little tiny sticks, rather than something like a super fine powder. But for more details about making substitutions or choosing different formats, please make sure you're reading the blog post linked in the description box below. The SLSa we're using is a really fine powder, so you don't see it in the bars at all. Paired with a bit of amphoteric Cocamidopropyl Betaine, we just get absolutely gorgeous lather from these bars, and yes, they are sulfate-free. The making part of these bars is really simple, and while you don't need a mold, you definitely do need a really good dust mask, one that fits and seals really tightly so you're not inhaling the surfactants, because oh my goodness, inhaling powdered surfactants is incredibly unpleasant. So make sure you've got a really good tight-fitting dust mask, not just sort of one of those cardboard ones, but something that really suctions onto your face. And then you'll also need some nitrile gloves for mixing everything up with your hands. Once you've squished everything together and molded these bars, we'll leave them to dry for a few days, and then they are ready to use. But come on, let's go make some gorgeous pink clay Mosaic shampoo bars. We're going to begin by combining our heated phase ingredients in a small beaker. You're going to need 10.5 grams of kokum butter, 4.5 grams stearic acid, and 18.75 grams pink Australian clay. And if you need substitutions, please make sure you're reading the blog post linked in the description box below. To melt this together, I'm going to use a water bath. So this is a small flat bottom saucepan that has about 1 inch or 3 centimeters of water in the bottom of it. And I'm going to go put this on the stovetop over medium heat for about 20 minutes until everything has melted through. Once the heated phase has melted, we are ready to proceed. I am going to be putting my dust mask on pretty shortly here, so I'm going to kind of talk you through what we're doing before the dust mask goes on, since you can't hear me very well with the dust mask on. So in this bowl we have our powdered surfactants. We have 60 grams of granulated Sodium Cocoyl Isethionate. When we get close, you can see that it is quite chunky and lumpy, and then the finer powder there is sodium lauryl sulfoacetate. 45 grams of that. In this little bowl here, we have 9 grams of Cocamidopropyl Betaine, 1.5 grams of our fragrance, and 0.75 grams of liquid germall plus, which is our preservative. And then of course over here we have the heated phase ingredients that we combined earlier. So our first step is going to be transferring these heated phase ingredients into the surfactants. Now I'm going to put on my dust mask and use my gloved hands to mash that all together. All right, so I'm taking my dust mask off now because this mixture is now so thoroughly wetted out that there's no surfactant dust floating around. So you can see that this has a very kind of dough-like consistency. So you don't need a press to press these. You can see that these would, you could pretty much just squeeze this into a handful or roll it into a ball and leave it to dry out a bit and you'd be ready to go. But I am definitely going to use the press to make these. So So here we have the gorgeous press, and we have our mold. And so for these shampoo bars, I am using the small square cube mold that I have. I've cut some pieces of parchment paper to line it for easier removal of the shampoo bars. So thank you to Ariane for that tip. And so now all that's left to do is to divide this batch in half by weight. So I've got a scale here. So it'll be roughly 2 75-gram bars. Press them both and then leave them to dry. After unmolding, all that's left for the bars we just made is they need to dry out before we can use them, and for more discussion on that, please make sure you're reading the blog. But here is a bar that I made a couple months ago and then have been using in my shower for a while, and you can see that it does take on this really pretty sort of mosaic appearance as those larger chunks of Sodium Cocoyl Isethionate kind of start to shine through the darker base of the clay. We're also going to do a bit of a lather demo, using a loofah to sort of simulate a head of hair here. You can see that once it has been worked up into a lather, there is a lot to go around. And you can see that the lather is like ever so slightly pink-ish, but it's not really dark or really pink by any means. I probably still wouldn't use this with like a white washcloth, but I certainly haven't had any issues with loofahs. And there we go. So that's how you make a pink clay mosaic shampoo bar. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and please make sure you are reading the blog post linked in the description box below for more information about this formulation, including links to places to buy all the ingredients, information on substitutions, scaling, shelf life, and a whole lot more. But thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.